Welcome to Story Time. Today's story, and continuing for the next 3 or 4 days, is Polar the Titanic Bear, a true story about this beautiful toy bear. I'm starting today with the introduction to the story. I discovered this story about a little boy and his toy bear among the belongings of one of my relatives, Daisy Corning Stone Spedden. It is a true story that Daisy wrote for her only son, Douglas. She painted a cover illustration for it and gave it to Douglas on Christmas Day in 1913, when he was 8 years old. Douglas, or Master as he is called in the story, adored Polar, his beautiful white mohair bear. Polar was made by the famous Steiff Company of Germany and was bought by Douglas's aunt at F.A.O. Schwartz in New York City. Now the oldest toy shop in America, F.A.O. Schwartz still sells Steiff bears. Polar was no ordinary bear. He had several outfits and his own furniture. He took part in all family celebrations and holidays. Best of all, Polar went along on the Speddens family's world travels. Douglas's parents were very wealthy. They were able to devote their lives to their son, their travels, and their hobbies. Daisy kept detailed diaries and was a photography buff. Her husband Frederick loved sailing. Douglas had a nanny, Elizabeth Margaret Burns, whom he called Muddy Boons, because he couldn't quite pronounce her name. The family lived in a fashionable town outside New York City named Tuxedo Park. They spent summers at the seaside near Bar Harbor, Maine, and winters at resorts around the world. The Speddens travelled on luxurious ocean liners that visited exotic ports in the Caribbean, Africa, and the south of France. Douglas was lucky enough to see things that other children could only read about, including the Panama Canal, one of the greatest engineering achievements of all time, and the Eiffel Tower, the highest structure in the world in 1912. But life 80 years ago was not perfect, even for the rich. In those days there was no cure for childhood diseases such as measles, and children who caught the deadly illness had to be separated from other people during the long recovery period. And travelling from Europe to North America was not simply a matter of a 6-hour flight on a jet. Planes were rare, and the only way to cross the ocean was to spend 7 days on an ocean liner. When the Speddens were able to book passage to America on the Titanic in April 1912, they considered themselves very lucky. The Titanic was the biggest, newest ship in the world, a floating palace that contained every modern convenience and luxury. Douglas and Polar stepped onto the most magnificent passenger ship ever built in a state of great excitement. They never dreamed that they would soon be part of the most famous sea disaster of all time. Tune in later for the next instalment of Polar the Titanic Bear.